All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Abna Owusuwa Nyanta, and I'm your host for We Need to Talk. Thank you for joining us live today. Please remember, if you've not subscribed to the channel, kindly do so. And please share, 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 share. Thank you so much. And so before we get started, remember O&O Signature. We sell all things African. We sell clothes for men, for women, for children, and everybody of all ages and sizes. We have your accessories from your necklaces to your earrings, your sandals, your purses, your wallets for men and for women as well. You can contact O&O Signature at 469-769-2306. Again, it's 469-769-2306. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at OO Signature. Again, it's OO Signature on Facebook and also on Instagram. So thank you again for joining us live today. This is We Need to Talk. Please remember again to share, and please remember again to subscribe. So today I have with me my guest, and his name is Dr. Phil Baden, and I'm going to give him that opportunity for him to introduce himself and also tell us about himself. So Dr. Phil, over to you.
Yo, thank you, Abna. My name is Philip Baden, and I go by Phil. I am an assistant professor at the University of Texas at Arlington in the School of Social Work.
Okay, please elaborate a little bit about your personal life. We want to kind of get to know you, your family, children, where you're from, and that kind of stuff too.
Yo, thank you. I'm originally from Ghana, and I grew up in Ghana, where I did my high school, what we call SS, and my university education. I went to University of Ghana, Legon. After that, I did national service, work a little bit, and then I got an opportunity to go to Canada to do my master's. So I did my master's in Canada, and then again work a little bit and went on to do my PhD, where I finished at the University of Toronto. I have a family, a beautiful wife, and 3 kids, so that keeps me occupied and organized. I've been here in Texas since 2017, so almost 4 years now.
Okay, and how are you liking it in Texas?
I love it. It's very different from Canada, but it is what it is. So I'm getting used to it. I often joke that when I get my cowboy hat and cowboy boots, then I'll say that I'm truly 100% Texan. But I'm getting there. I'm working on it.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Thank you so much, Dr. Phil. So, as you guys know, this year we ask questions about Africa to our guests and then try to see what they can come up, if they can come up with the answer. So if you're watching us live today, you can be part of the show as well. Please remember, you can type your comments in the comment section. If you have an answer, please type it. If you have a contribution, put it in the comments. And please remember, share, 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 and subscribe. So Dr. Phil, the first question is, can you please name some countries in Africa that start with the letter A?
With the letter A?
Yes, sir.
Algeria, okay. Angola.
Okay. Okay. There you go. Okay. Now, let me ask you one more thing. Can you tell us the color of the Nigerian flag?
The color of Nigerian flag? White, green.
Yes.
Yeah, it's white and green.
Yes, it is
That's
white and green. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Dr. Phil. So today we are going to be talking about adverse childhood experiences and the stigma with mental health when it comes to our African community or our African society. So without wasting any more time, I'm going to let the expert do all the talking. I said we were going to bring on professionals, and Dr. Phil, as he said, he's a professor. He is a professional in this field, so he is going to tell us about it. So Dr. Phil, when we say adverse childhood experience or ACE, what does it mean?
Yo, thank you. When we talk about adverse childhood experiences, or typically abbreviated to mean ACE, basically refers to stress or traumatic event that happens to an individual typically before the age of 18.
Okay.
And some of the common ACEs that we do assess or we see are emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional neglect, physical neglect, parental death,
Okay.
parental separation or divorce, household incarceration, mental illness in the household, and drug or substance use in the household. Recently, there has been a push to also broaden the ACEs literature to include perceived discrimination or racism
Okay.
and neighborhood violence, as well as history of foster family placement and school bullying.
Okay.
Because when we look at the ACEs literature, we do see that certain communities are exposed to different forms of ACEs than others. So, for instance, we do know that within the African American and the black community, one of the predominant ACEs that we see has to do with neighborhood violence.
Okay.
And we also do know within the LGBTQ community that one of the common ACEs that they experience has to do with bullying victimization. So there has been that call to broaden the ACEs measure to also take into account those other communities that are traditionally not being assessed with respect to the traditional ACEs.
Okay. All right. So that you mentioned the African American community or the black community. So now specifically to the Africans, what are some of the common ACEs within our African community?
Yeah. So some of the common ACEs that we do see within the African community has to do with exposure to domestic violence
Okay.
and neglect.
Okay.
Given that we do know that with respect to domestic violence, individuals, this is a common occurrence that we see in African homes. It takes various forms. It's sometimes not necessarily a physical abuse where between a mother and a father, but we also see some psychological abuse that happens. So domestic violence is something that is very common in the African community.
Okay.
And the more children are exposed to such type of violence, the more stress that brings to them, which then leads to other negative consequences.
Okay. And with the ACE within the African community, are these experiences being experienced by the children themselves, or is this what they are seeing within the home?
Yes, so there's they do experience, some children experience themselves.
Okay.
Also, they also witness it in the house. So with respect to domestic violence, it's something that children are being exposed to constantly. And the more they get exposure to that type of violence, they also have the tendency of perpetrating that when they grow into adulthood. So we have what we call intergenerational transmission of trauma.
Okay.
That a child who has been exposed constantly to domestic violence grows to internalize those exposure and also feels like that is a normal way of treating a significant other in the household, thereby continuing that line of violence.
Okay. So, in our African home, when we talk about domestic violence, I can say we look at the abuse from the physical abuse part of it. What about the emotional and psychological abuse? Do those also have effects on the child?
Yeah, sometimes those the emotional and the psychological abuse have more consequences to the child because children these days are very smart. They can spot what happened between a husband and a wife, a parent.
Yeah.
That you may think that, oh, by not fighting physically, a child is not observing what is taking place in the household environment. But a child who is observing to see how is the dad treating the mom, and is the dad using abusive languages towards the mom.
Okay.
And children are able to pick some of those. Also, instances where there are some financial abuse in the household where one parent or one partner is very controlling, that child sometimes is able to pick and know that, oh, this,
Normal.
my, say my dad only reacts this way when my mom asks for something relating to this. So the emotional and psychological abuse that takes place within the domestic settings, also something that children are able to pick early, and the stress that comes with that sometimes, as I talk about, is very harmful. We take, for instance, a child who it's an environment that has been created to the point that a child is always frightened when the dad is coming home. So when the child can be playing normally with the mom and everything, but as soon as the child hears the garage door open, the environment changes, that everything has to be reorganized quickly, because if not, the dad is going to come with a more aggressive or inappropriate
Attitude.
discipline measures. So that child is constantly living in fear that he or she is afraid to seek out or to express himself in a way that sometimes, if the environment is created such that if the child try to express him or herself in a way that is not appropriate, but there is positive parenting in the household, the child will not feel intimidated in expressing him or herself. So he or she will live freely and be able to participate in any household discussion freely.
Okay.
But when that environment is not created, the child becomes very timid and is always afraid to speak up or to ask questions.
Okay. So now, in a home where there is an abuser and and the
A victim.
victim, is the do children, from according to your studies, do children learn more from the abuser, or are they learning the behaviors of the victims?
It shows that children often learn more from the abuser, but they also have the tendency of sympathizing with the victim. So they draw more, they empathize with the victim, but as they grow, if they don't get the required support and counseling, they also go on to perpetrate the abuse that they've witnessed, because they've constantly seen in the household that, yes, dad is always using abusive languages or abusive words towards the mom, so they also feel like that language is proper. But from the beginning, they do realize that such language is not appropriate, so they tend to empathize or sympathize with the victim.
But eventually they accept that as a norm.
Yes, they
Okay.
grow on to accept that, also depending on the environment where those behaviors tend to be glorified or tend to be rationalized, then they also feel like, oh, okay, then that becomes the norm.
Okay. All right. So what are some of the effects of these ACE?
Yeah, so the effect on ACE is multifaceted. We see the effect in terms of physical health, mental health, criminal justice involvement, and even as early as early childhood. With respect to physical health, the research is fairly consistent that the more exposure the more a child is exposed to, the greater the likelihood of experiencing cancer, stroke, cardiovascular diseases, high blood pressure, and diabetes. And with respect to suicide, it's even as much as 7 times more likely. So children, the more you're exposed to that, the greater your risk. We also see it in criminal justice involvement, that youth individuals who are exposed to frequent ACEs are more likely to have to come into to be in conflict with the law. They are more also, if they go to school, they're also more likely to be suspended. Okay. They are more likely to repeat a grade and to be expelled from school. Okay. As early as ages 5, we did some study recently where we found that those who experience, children as young as 5, who experience frequent ACEs are also more likely to experience household food insecurity. So when you think about that, the very formative years of a child are ages 0 to 3. And that is where the brain is developing. So a child whose brain is developing and is exposed to frequent trauma, that child, it has a tendency to cognitively affect that child's development, and it carries on even into older adulthood.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us live today. Please remember, if you've not subscribed, kindly subscribe. You can tell if you're subscribed if it has a D at the end of subscribe. If it doesn't have a D, that means you've not subscribed yet. So please kindly subscribe. You don't have to pay to subscribe. Also, remember to share the link so others can join as well. Today, I am sitting here with Dr. Phil, and we are talking about adverse childhood experiences. So when you hear us use the term ACE, it's not HIV/AIDS. We're talking about A.C.E. Adverse childhood experiences, and these are the experiences of trauma, or the experiences that a child the experiences that a child goes through in a younger age, but yet it has effect on their life for the rest of their life, if I can say that. And according to what Dr. Phil is saying, within a home where there's an abuse, a child picks up on the behaviors of the abuser, so the person that is acting on or abusing the other. And eventually, if they keep seeing that or they keep experiencing that, that becomes a norm, which essentially becomes a cycle. So whatever the child is seeing in the home at a young age, that is the norm for them. So once they grow up within their homes, they're gonna also do the same thing, and then their children are gonna pick up on that, and it's gonna be an ongoing cycle. So today we are talking about adverse childhood experiences. We are also gonna also hit on mental health stigma within the African community, because we know this is what is out there. We need to talk. It's all about educating one another. We want to know, we want to learn, and the things that are that has happened within our own lives or our own childhood that did not benefit us in our adulthood. We want to be conscious of it so that we can do better for the next generation, so they can do better, and we can eliminate all the things that didn't help, and then build up more on the positive aspects of life. So thank you so much for joining us live today. So Dr. Phil, you mentioned that some of the effects of AIDS within the African community. You talked about health issues. Yes. You talk about heart attack. You even talk about cancer. You talk about within, I guess, the younger population, children that are in school tend to be suspended more. So they are the ones that act out more in schools. After a child has developed, because you mentioned earlier that it's all the way till the age of 18. Now, after the age of 18, for somebody that has experienced AIDS, what are some of the things that you can do to, is it reversible?
Yes, so
Okay.
ACEs can be mitigated.
Okay.
The impact can be mitigated.
Okay.
And as I said, it is a body's stress response mechanism. So once you've been exposed to that, it affects your stress response.
Okay.
And there are three levels at which the body is able to respond to stress. We have what we call positive stress response, and tolerable stress response, and toxic stress response.
Okay.
Positive stress response has to do with normal stress that we all go through, we all experience. Say, for instance, a child who has to receive vaccination will experience some stress and hesitation, but with time, after that, he or she becomes normal.
After they get the
vaccination. So the stress that that child experienced before,
okay.
It's not as impactful as other stress.
Okay.
We have what we call tolerable stress, which is a stress that when managed we will not be able to see its impact. For instance, somebody who has a car accident or somebody who has lost a loved one. Okay. It's very stressful. Yeah. But if you lose your home, that can also be very stressful. But with the right support and the right treatment, those stress can be managed. Okay. Now, it becomes an issue when tolerable stress are not managed. That is when it develops into toxic stress, okay. And that's when we see its impact on health and mental health outcome way into adulthood, older okay. adulthood.
Okay, you talked about the toxic way of dealing with stress. So in that, how does that look like? Can you paint a picture of how toxic way of dealing with stress is?
Yeah, so for instance, if somebody has been exposed to stress constantly, it has a tendency of affecting the person's brain, that when the person has to go through some slightest challenge or provocation, the mechanism that is required for that person to see through, keep calm, and deal with whatever he or she is going through. Because things has been building on in the person's system, in the brain already, the slightest provocation could lead to more devastating consequences.
Does experiencing stress frequently add to how a person respond or deal with stress?
As in, the more frequent
You
stress
experience.
you experience will teach you how to handle it.
Will it affect the person? Say somebody is able to manage their stress, but then over time they start stressing more over other things too. So instead of them, you talked about the vaccination, which is simple. Let's say a loved one.
Yes.
You within this COVID season, we know a lot of people have lost loved ones, and then there's that separation from the people that we are closest to. And so, say somebody lost a loved one, maybe within 6 months or within a short amount of time they lose another loved one, then they lose a job, then something else happen. So with the frequency of all these stresses coming to the person's life, does that impact how a person deals with stress? Or once the mechanism of dealing with stress is built, it doesn't matter how frequent one deals with it?
Oh no, it has it has a huge impact, irrespective of the mechanism that you've already developed.
Okay.
So when you have a cascading effect of events, you lost a loved one, and within this environment, the support system that you rely on and has also been curtailed, that you do not have enough contact with people that you can count on that can provide that support. And you're also dealing with perhaps job loss or financial insecurity. All those adds up and build up. So it's good if you've developed some stress response mechanism to deal with that. But human as we are, things do get to us, and the more you experience those events, the greater it is that you may have difficulty managing, or you may have difficulty controlling instances where you have to restrain yourself, or you have to deal with the health impact of other events.
Okay. So what are some of the right ways of managing stress?
Yeah, one way to manage stress is as simple as engaging in physical activity.
Example.
So being physically active, engaging in moderate or vigorous physical activity at least 60 minutes every day. So that could be as simple as taking a walk, biking, or even engaging in gardening.
Okay.
Things that you do that keeps you active. It's going to the gym or exercising, playing in a sports team. Things that you do to keep you active is able to help your immune system. It's able to help you process event that comes to you.
Managing stress and coping, are they the same?
They are not the same.
Okay.
When you are managing stress, you are relying on various techniques or various approaches to control the stress response.
Okay.
When you have to cope with it, it's said that you have already experienced those events and you are using the resources that are already available at your disposal in order to deal with the stress so that its impact can be mitigated.
Okay. So now I'm going to get very specific within our African homes, because we in the diaspora, especially our parents, some of them have 2 jobs, some of them have 3 jobs. So the time they come home, all they want to do is eat and sleep. But they also have stressors within their own personal life around them in the environment that they're in, and then with everything else that life has to throw to them. And you mentioned that you have to at least be physically active. So when one is at work and moving about, is that considered being physically active, or in the context where they are working, it's not counted towards it?
Typically, it depends on when they are at work, the type of physical activity that they are engaging.
Okay.
So if somebody's at work and the nature of the work is such that you have to stand on your feet for many hours, you may be getting some movement of your physical body, but that may not necessarily serve the purpose. You have to, when we talk of physical activity, you have to plan and engage in some of those. So I concede that certain professions or some of the things that we do, the nature of the 24-hour cycle that we work in sometimes does not permit us to find time and engage in that. But if you are able to find some time and engage in some form of physical activity, for instance, if you are somebody who you like to park very close to your workplace, you may sometimes decide to park maybe 5 minutes and take some walk that will enable you get to your workplace and coming back to your car to also be able to get some walk, and through that you also engaging in some amount of physical activity. So any type of activity that you can engage in that will keep your system, your circulatory system moving and active is very helpful.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to cite two pictures for you and we're going to discuss it. When we look at people outside abroad, outside of Africa, you know, we have the convenience of our vehicle where you come out of your house and your car is there. You get out of your car and the building is right here and you enter. And then we have Africa where to get a car, you literally have to walk so many miles. You even at the bus stop, you have to fight people physically to get in a car. So within these two environments, are people able to cope better in the African setting because of how we are able to navigate, or does that not even matter?
Oh, it makes a difference. Yeah, back home in Ghana, the type of situation makes it sad that it's much easier to clock. I talk about 60 minutes of active, moderate to vigorous physical activity. It's very easy to get that. When you have to walk from your house to the roadside to pick trotro, and the struggle even to go through. You engage in some physical activity, some walking in order to get there. Hardly will you live on a street that there's a trotro right at your street, unless you are taking a taxi. So that struggle, the walking and those activities that we have to engage in back home keeps us very active. So when we come here in the comfort of our car, right from the garage to the workplace, sometimes if you have a device that is able to track the amount of steps that you take, you realize that in some days, if you just move straight from your garage to your workplace, you may be taking less than 2,000 steps, which is way below the recommended 10,000 steps that we all need to take. So I would say back home, the type of environment and the struggle that people go through, it helps in a way that keeps them very active.
Okay. Thank you all for joining us live today. Again, we are talking about adverse childhood experiences, and we are also going to be hitting on the stigmas associated with mental health within our African community. So we're going to read some of the comments that we have on Facebook and on YouTube. On YouTube, I believe Mr. Peter Owusu is watching us. Thank you for joining us live, Mr. Peter. And Miss Elizabeth Ann, thank you for joining us. She said it is an honor for her to be part of this experience. She said, not trying to generalize, but why is it often difficult for African culture to accept belief in mental health issues? And Mr. Ravdi said, hi. Miss Elizabeth Ann said hi. Miss Denise Ade Champon said hi. So, Miss Elizabeth, we are going to hit on the mental health aspect of things. We are not there yet, but trust me, we are going to talk about that. And on Facebook right now, I think everybody that's watching is quiet, so they're not saying anything. And is gaming kid said good afternoon. Miss Denise Hade Champon said this is very educative. Thank you. Thank you for everybody that is joining us live today. Remember, we are talking and we are learning as well. If you have any comments, any questions, please kindly drop it in the comment box. Remember to subscribe and also share the link. So, Dr. Phil, here we are within our African community. Let's say for a child that has experienced AIDS and now they are in their adulthood, they only know what they experienced in their childhood, but yet they want to do better for their children. So what are some of the steps that they can take to make life better for their children so they don't have to experience the same thing that they did?
Yes, so one of the steps that we all can take is to acknowledge that AIDS is a toxic event that is not good for anyone. So the tendency for some individual to feel like, well, I grew up in Ghana where I was spanked or where I experienced neglect, I was bullied, and I turned out okay. That mindset is something that we need to discourage.
Yeah.
That you experience it, you're able to come out successfully, but you have to ask yourself, is it proper that your child or any other child should also be experienced or be exposed to that? When we think about physical abuse, spanking, we think about sexual abuse. Those events are things that have dire consequence for a child. So if in a family somebody, say you are not fortunate in a family, you've been exposed to abject poverty, yet you manage to come out, it should be your responsibility that you try as much to provide a better platform or system in place so that your child will also learn that this growing up in an environment with so much poverty or in a neighborhood stricken with violence will not serve that child's need. So when you are in such a situation, it will be good to bear that in mind, that the environment that we are in here is very different from the environment we grew up in Ghana. You may have experienced that, and through some support mechanisms turn out okay. But here we are, when this child has this experience and he goes to school and it's having an impact on that. If that child doesn't receive the right care, the right support, counseling, it can continue to linger on for long.
Okay. And I want us to talk a bit about neglect because, well, first off, let me let you explain or describe what neglect is, and we will talk more in depth about it.
Yeah, so neglect can take various forms. That not paying proper attention to the child, leaving a child unattended to, not providing the right clothing for a child. So in the winter or when the temperature is very cold, not allowing the child the right dressing. Things like that are considered neglect.
Neglect.
Not providing enough food in a household where the child will be able to eat a healthy and nutritious meal is also considered neglect. So it's not only not paying attention to the child where the child may be in a danger of being involved in an accident, say, for instance, leaving a child unattended to by a fire or a knife, things like that are also considered neglect.
Okay. In our African society or in our African community back home, you sometimes hear story of like men sexually abusing younger children, and some of these children, there is this trauma that they experience, but yet they are not able to express it to their families or their guardians or whoever is supposed to be taking care of them. Are there signs that you can notice in a child that can alert you that something is going on?
Yes, so some of the signs that you can see will be a child withdrawing. Okay. A child withdrawing from activities that he or she usually enjoys.
Okay.
So if a child is usually playful, say maybe enjoy playing with certain group of friends or say enjoy playing ampe or soccer, and all of a sudden this child doesn't take any interest, or in a family gathering, if the perpetrator is a family relation, that there is going to be a family gathering, all of a sudden that child has no interest or desire in being in such an environment. Those could be signs that something is not right or something is happening that has to be addressed. Now, sometimes too, it takes a lot of trust for the child to open up, because what research has shown is that there is sexual abuse often get underreported significantly, because those who experience it sometimes feels that when they report the abuse, they are not believed, or they get to be blamed that, oh, your uncle will never do such a thing. He didn't mean to, or he never intended that. So the child is the one who experienced it. And if the child gets to know or has the feeling that what I've experienced, if I try to disclose this abuse to an adult relative, and they're not going to believe me, or they will shame me that I'm the one who dressed in a provocative way to attract that. That child will automatically internalize that and will not come forward to disclose the abuse and then go on to get the requisite treatment. So the environment that is created will impact how a child will disclose the abuse.
Okay.
And if the child feels like he or she is not going to be believed when he or she discloses the abuse, that child will continue to internalize the abuse. And it's been shown that those that rather have a significant consequences when a child discloses the abuse and he or she is not believed. Then in that case, it's like, oh, something that I thought I have experienced is being trivialized, or they're blaming me for something that I have been victimized for.
Okay. All right. So, you know, I had asked that if somebody was being neglected or if something was happening with a child, how could you tell? But in that, the parent has to pay attention. And the point that I wanted to come across, or I wanted to get across, is so when it comes to neglect, parents have to be able to see to the needs of the child and not just with the material things. Because here we are in this country, and I don't know about other countries, UK, Canada, and all those other ones, but parents are so consumed with so much that it's almost like once they provide that material provision for the child, that is the end of it. But within the life of a little child, food is important, but attention is necessary. Because for the child to be able to even build on the trust that you're talking about, there has to be that relation where the child is able to open up to a parent, and the parent has to also pay attention, right?
Yes.
And when those things are eliminated, how then is a child supposed to even feel confident or comfortable coming to a parent that is emotionally not there?
Absolutely. So, in the definition of ACE, one of the measures has to do with emotional neglect.
Okay.
That when the parent is not attuned to the emotional needs of a child, that child will have difficulty relating to the parent. So you're right. It is not enough to provide all the material things and not being attuned to the child, not to find out what is going on in the child's life. What type of friend does the child has? What type of conversation? So when you have that parent-child conversation where you open up to your child, the child will be willing to tell you things that even may happen outside the house. So you have to show some interest in the child and not use languages that belittle the child, and also be attuned to the child's emotional needs. So it will not always be that what you say will be right, but when you create the right environment, the child will feel comfortable that, yes, when I have something to talk about how I'm feeling, if I don't feel happy, I can talk to you that, oh, mom, dad, today I don't feel happy, or I'm just sad, I'm this. The child, when you open up, that child will be able to know and be able to disclose something like that, or will tell you. So that's the aspect of emotional neglect. And you're right that it is not enough to provide the material things and all the toys and all the gaming equipment and leave the child alone to fend for him or herself. The emotional trust has to be there so that as the child is growing, is reaching puberty, the type of things that the child is going through, the emotional stress, the emotional things that the child is going through, you'll be able to have conversation around that and build a trust so the child will be able to tell you things that he or she may be experiencing.
Thank you. So for parents that are watching us, Dr. Phil mentioned that, sometimes parents will make the comments that, oh, I was neglected, or maybe I went through this challenge or this difficulty where we didn't even have cars or we didn't have food. I was walking to school and all that, and I'm fine, so you need to do better. But even with that said, we still have to remember that every place has its own challenges. So just because somebody was born here in America or outside of Africa somewhere, and the basic needs or the basic necessities of life, which is food and shelter, is provided, doesn't mean that everything else is going to just automatically fall into place. Parents still have to take their role. So the things that you were neglected in, the things that you were abused of in your childhood, these are the things that you have to be mindful that your children don't even experience it. Sometimes it's not being able to give them just education in terms of going to school, but educating them on all aspects of life, having them even be emotionally intelligent, having them being able to express themselves, because that is how children learn. They are not like, nobody was born knowing everything. Nobody was born perfect. We pick up things, we experience things, and then we become who we become. So as parents, it is the responsibility for you to be mindful when it comes to the upbringing of your children. Now, Dr. Phil, we're going to divert to the stigmas of
Before we
mental
move,
health.
you said something that I want to re-emphasize, that
Okay.
the parents should also not feel like they've experienced that and they don't want their children to go through that. Something that's also important has to do with parents living and practicing what they preach.
Okay.
Because children observe more what they see than what they hear. It is not enough to be preaching that, oh, this is how I treat my wife, this is how I treat my kid, yet your actions speaks otherwise or tells otherwise. The child will learn more from what you do than sometimes than what you say. So if you truly want to demonstrate, if you truly want to be a role model for your child on how to treat other women or how to treat other people, be courteous, let that show, so the child will observe that. If you go into a place, somebody opens a door for you, you say thank you. The child learns that more than when you tell the child that when somebody opens door for you, you should say thank you. If the child watches you and say, well, Dad, that speaks a lot. So it is also not enough to preach and to talk about that, but we should put that into
Practice.
action so that children will also observe that.
Thank you, Dr. Phil. Thank you. So remember, practice what you preach and preach what you practice, and don't do it the opposite way, because your children are watching. Everybody is watching you for that matter. So, Dr. Phil, now what is the stigma of mental health within our African community?
Yeah, so thank you. This is a type of conversation that if we are to continue, we'll probably not be able to finish today, but we'll try. So, mental health generally has to do with emotional, psychological, and social well being, and not necessarily just the absence of any disease. Now, what that means is that when we talk about one's emotional and psychological or social well being, we are talking about things that helps an individual to fully realize his or her potential, which therefore means that it is something which we have to embrace, that at some point in life we will experience instances where we will feel depressed or we feel distressed, that will get to the point where it may have the tendency of slowing down our lifestyle or what we do. Now, if we embrace that, if we have that mindset that it will be normal at some point to experience that, that will in a way help us not to stigmatize individuals who may be experiencing some symptoms of anxiety or depression. Okay, so the idea sometimes that we see back home in Ghana, in African community, that when we talk about mental health or when we talk about mental illness, then we tend to relate it only to individuals who are on the street or who, quote unquote, will say are in psychiatric institutions. Those are not only instances where we see mental health being manifested. And when we view mental health solely in that frame, then it makes it difficult for individuals who are experiencing psychological distress to come forward, because by coming forward to seek treatment for normal stress or distress, they will be tagged with the label of being mentally ill. with the same mindset that we have in Ghana, that if you are somebody who has a mental illness, then you have to be confined into an asylum or into a facility where you have to be chained before you give medication or treatment.
So within our African community, we basically pay no attention to mental health. That's
Yeah,
what
that's
you're saying.
something we don't do a good job at, and it's time that we start looking at mental health just as any physical health. The way we approach physical health symptoms, the way we take good care of our physical health, is the same way we need to also take the same mindset that we need to attach to mental health.
Okay, thank you. So we are talking about mental health, and by profession, I'm in the mental health field, and this is a field just like you said. We Africans don't pay mind to. We are not. We don't. We just don't bother. It's like everything is fine with us, but everything is not fine with us because we are human beings, and just as you said, we experience trauma, we experience depression. I think maybe a month or so ago, there was this guy. He's a comedian in Ghana, and he experienced depression. And he was on a show, he was on an interview, and they were asking him how it was like. And he was trying his best to explain what depression was, but the host didn't understand.
Yeah.
And most of the comments that were coming on that show was just negative. And I sat there like looking with my professional eyes that this is somebody that was depressed, that was suicidal. He
Yeah.
needed the help, but all the people that were around him couldn't offer the help, and yet they were looking down on him because of what he was experiencing. Some people were saying that he was making it up, which honestly, I don't know why anybody will make up depression, but it can go so deep that it can damage one's life. And for somebody that's suicidal, they can end their life at that. So within our African community, what are some of the things that we can do to bring awareness, that people will be mindful that everything that we do from a day-to-day basis starts with the mind? So what are some of the things that we can do to bring awareness to our communities?
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that we can do, the most important thing is education.
Okay.
Education. That we need to constantly educate individuals, because we have to acknowledge that we are coming from a place that we have so much to do. The mindset of Ghanaians has changed with respect to certain things. Ghanaians have been able to adapt certain lifestyle of the West, but when it comes to the attention that they devote to mental health, it's close to zero. Because there is the idea, as you're describing, somebody is experiencing, he said he's experiencing these symptoms. It is not up to anyone to invalidate the person's experiences. He knows what he's going through. And the reason why I talk about education is that we need to have education that normalizes conversations around mental health. Because when we stigmatize it, somebody else who is going through a similar experience will look at the amount of vilification that's been visited on this person. It's like, I'm not going to come out in order to go through this. And you talk about this person maybe is a celebrity, yet is being attacked on all those fronts. What about somebody who is going through a similar thing, but is looking at what this person is coming out to express, and is being met with condemnation that, oh, this cannot be mental health, or this is a lie. Things like that don't help our cause, but we just have to continue the awareness, the education, so people know that it is okay to feel depressed at some point. It is okay to feel downhearted at some time. It's okay to sometimes even question why things are going the way they are. But when those things happen, we should reach out. We should reach out for help. We should reach out for support. And when we are in a situation where others reach out to us, we should not invalidate their experience. We should not look at people and feel like, oh, you are too successful to be experiencing this. You have a job, you have a nice house, a nice car. How can you be experiencing mental health when you have other people who don't have resources? We should not look at it that way, that it is only we should not look at it that those who are successful or those who have made it are okay with respect to mental health, that they cannot experience that. So we need to continue the education, the awareness, so that we take away the stigma surrounding mental health for those who experience similar things to also come forward and to seek help. Because mental health can be treated. There are a lot of services. You just have to seek early treatment. Like any other physical health, the earlier the treatment that you seek, the more likelihood that the issue will be resolved.
Okay. With the limitation of even the idea or people realizing that there is mental health, do we have enough resources within our African communities for mental health?
Well, I'm somebody who always believed that we need to keep doing more. So there are resources, there are counselors, and there are general physicians are also trained to assess for mental health symptoms. And so when individuals go for their physical checkup, they have opportunity to also assess for mental health. And I would say that we need, within the African community, we also need to continue to have more culturally appropriate response, given that some of the things that we are pertinent to us in within the African Ghanaian community are very different from what a typical mainstream white or Caucasian will go through. So if we have certain mental health interventions that are culturally specific, based within our community, that understands our environment, that will also go a long way to help.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Dr. Phil. The next question I was going to ask was, is the church also a good source to help in terms of mental health?
Yes, I would say that the church, it's a good place. The church has been playing a critical role in helping mental health. At the same time, there are also instances where the approach that individual attach to the church environment and religion broadly sometimes doesn't help. Because we do know that religion or religiosity plays a very important role, protective role against health, physical health, and many mental health. That individuals who are actively involved in some religious organization, the amount of support that they derive from the community goes a long way. Even the teachings, some of the teachings in the faith tells us that, yes, what we're going through here is a challenge, it's a life. It reminds us that all experience, life is never going to be rosy. Things are never going to be obtained easily. That we have to work with sweat, blood, and tears in order to get to where we want to get to. So that teachings in the faith reminds individuals that we have to be resilient in what we go through. There are various studies showing that individuals who are very religious live longer. We did a study some time ago. We looked at immigrants in Canada, where we found that we follow them over time. We found that those who do not attend church regularly, they have the risk of they dying early is much greater than those who attend regularly. So it's about 4 months on average. They're more likely to die earlier, 4 months on average, than those who attend regularly. Okay. Now, this has not much to do with prayer or any relation, but just frequent attendance. Okay. So generally, religion plays a very protective role in against mental health. Now, on the other hand, too, the approach that sometimes we see in our community, especially in Ghana, where people subscribe everything to religion, sometimes doesn't help.
Okay.
Okay. So there are certain things that has to be dealt with scientifically before we back it with our faith. So if you have any physical health symptoms, say if you are diabetic or if you have high blood pressure, if you have cancer, you don't abandon the treatment that your general physician recommends for you and resort only to maybe prayer or giving money to somebody to pray for you and refuse to seek the requisite treatment. You pursue the treatment that is being recommended for you whilst you back that with your faith. Okay. So whatever your faith tells you, if you believe is very crucial, is very central to your general well-being, you have to draw on that whilst you also pursue or whilst you also follow the science behind whatever you're going through. So when it comes to mental health, because of the stigma that we have, the stigma that we attach to mental health in the Ghanaian community, sometimes it's very difficult for us to seek the right treatment. It's very difficult for us to approach a counselor and discuss our issues so that the counselor can recommend the requisite therapy or the requisite medication and intervention for us. But we rather tend to pastors who sometimes chain people in places with the idea that when we pray for you, we'll be able to exorcise whatever demon that is within you. So we need to know that there are certain things that have to be treated a certain way. If your faith tells you that this is how to go about in treating this particular symptom or sickness, what I would say is that also pay attention to the signs. Okay, so pay attention to the signs. I will not sit here and say that individuals should abandon their faith completely and follow the signs. But at the same time, my professional background and the little that I know also tells me that there is clear evidence in the signs that can be used to treat mental health. So you follow the signs, and if your faith also tells you of certain things to do in order to boost your system and your belief in how you can get better, then you also back that.
Okay, and then I also want to know, when somebody use the approach of faith and approach their pastor or their leader or their spiritual leader and let them know of what is happening with them mentally. Besides prayers, if the pastor doesn't have any background in mental health, can they suggest other things for them to do, or can they refer them to counselors as well?
Well, if the pastor is smart and very candid, he or she will be able to know his or her limitations and refer them to appropriate counseling services. So the idea or the tendency for pastors to feel like they know all, they are expert in everything, sometimes doesn't help, because they are individuals who are trained, who have the requisite license and the expertise to deal with certain things. So it is okay, given the role that our religious leaders play in the community. Sometimes they are the first point of contact of things that happen to us, even at home. So if certain things happen at home, individuals will feel comfortable disclosing those events to their religious leaders, their faith leaders. Now, it is up onto those leaders to know their limitation, or to know how far they can, that, oh, this is all I can. I can listen to you. I can provide the support that you need. I can do this. But I can also refer you to the appropriate professionals who are trained, who have the knowledge in how to handle this. So not feeling that you have to treat everything, you have to provide a solution to everything, will not help. And we also need to know that our leaders, our religious leaders, have their limitations. This is all that they can do. So that when we are going through certain things and they are suggesting or prescribing certain things to us, we should use our common sense and ask, is this really something that can? But sometimes, oftentimes, when individuals are in those situations, they tend to lose their common sense that everything that is thrown at them, they swallow it hook, line, and sinker. That you see a pastor telling you, go and drink this water and everything will be cured. And you feel like, oh, when I do this, it's going to help me. But you ask yourself, going to drink a pastor bathing and giving you his or her water to drink, what is the connection between that and curing what you are? So a little bit of common sense sometimes can help us go a long way. But I put a lot, I know the leaders that we have in our community are, most of them are professionals, that they will know their limits, that this is what I know, this is what my expertise are. I am a flock, I'm leading a congregation. This is what I can do. I can provide that spiritual direction and guidance. When it comes to certain things that I'm not able to, it's okay to refer them to the appropriate professional so that they can handle them properly.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Phil. As you were speaking, there are so many questions that are coming to mind, and I'm also trying to be mindful of our time. You know, of late, there's been news of somebody uh, back in Ghana getting a gun and shooting the girlfriend because he suspected that there was some type of cheating
Cheating.
going on. And then also, on another hand, there was another an Ethiopian or a Sierra Leonese 20-year-old boy in one of the states, upstates, that also got a gun and shot the mother because the mom was asking him to go out and get a job. And then recently I saw a Liberian also post on Facebook that this guy had brutally beaten up his girlfriend or his wife. I don't know what the status was. But there is so much that is happening
In the
within
community.
our African community. And we have this stigma when it comes to mental health of even coming out to seek for professional help. There is that stigma that it's not normal. Like if you come out and express yourself, even especially for men, that,
Yes.
oh my goodness, you're weak. A
Yes.
man is supposed to deal with this. But there are men that are being dealt with physically. There are men that are being dealt with mentally. And they also, some of them might have experienced ACE in their childhood. And so they have all these coupled up, and it leads to so many things and eventually them dying before their time. So, Dr. Phil, what are some of the encouraging words that you can tell those watching us today about mental health, and then also them being able to be receptive towards others that might be dealing with that mental health as well?
Yeah, so before I get there, I want to say that we we as a community or as professional, we need to keep encouraging and creating the awareness in the community that we glorifying violence in any form is unacceptable. So when individuals are in relationship and one person is abusing the other, it's highly unacceptable. I talk about the intergenerational trauma, the intergenerational ace that we see. Most often, when you see, you realize that those individuals have certain uh, trauma from the past that they either observe, experience themselves, or they've observed they live in an environment. So that becomes the norm. So what I would say is that we need to stop glorifying those behaviors. If you're in a relationship and it's not going well, and the other wants to leave, it can be very traumatizing, can be very devastating. But you have to know that you have no right, you do not own that person in order to lay your hand on the other person. Let alone take a gun. We have to come to the point where we accept that, hey, things, we may get into a relationship with the idea of things working out, but if it doesn't work out,
You're
people
free
should
to
be
go.
should be at liberty to live, and we can all live happily and say, okay, that's the end. It didn't work out. We learn from it and we move on. So within the community, we have to come to that realization so that we don't feel like we own the other person. You don't have to feel like I own my girlfriend, or I own my boyfriend, or I own my wife, where if he or she is not doing things the way I want, then I can resort to other violent means. Now, in terms of the mental health, I lost track of your other question about how to.
How do we, with somebody experiencing mental health, what are some of the things that you can tell them or advise or encourage them to do so that they can seek for the help that they need?
Yes, so I would say that, as I said, it's normal to experience mental health, so we need to let people know that the stigma that we see surrounding it, it's something that we have to we have to do away with, that they should seek counseling, they should seek help as they would normally do. When you seek counseling, it doesn't mean that you are weak. When you seek help, it doesn't mean that you are frail. If you are a man and you're going through trouble, you're going to trauma, it's perfectly fine. You've lost a relation, you've lost a loved one. That is very devastating. No matter how tough and how strong you are, you can't lose a loved one and just be happy, cheerful, like, oh, everything is fine, honky dory, and there's nothing to worry about. It will get to you. So you have to reach out for help, and we should normalize help seeking. We should normalize it so that when people reach out for help, we should not look at them like, oh, I was surprised this person is also going through this. It should not be a surprise if I have to seek for mental health counseling. That doesn't make me less of a man. It doesn't take away anything from me. It rather makes me conscious that I'm dealing with it now rather than let it wait to it get to a point where it becomes difficult, where maybe I may have to be put on medication or other intervention that may even have serious consequences than if I seek early treatment.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Phil. So, for everybody watching us today, thank you all so much. Today, we discuss ACE, which is adverse childhood experiences, and we also talked about the stigmas of mental health within our African community. That stigma, just as Dr. Phil said, is something that we need to break out of, because no matter what, who or where we come from, we are human beings. We have experiences. Life doesn't always go as planned. There are challenges, there are difficulties. Within this pandemic, there's been so much that has come up, especially in the mental health aspect of things. But here we are within our community where there is this stigma that we can't reach out. Please reach out, seek out help when you need it. There are counselors, there are therapists that are professional, that knows how they can talk to you or that know how to direct you in the things that you need to be better. Remember, if you're not at the right state of mind, nothing else that you do can be right, because everything stems from what you think or stems from the mind. So please remember this. If you're depressed, it is normal. People feel depressed. If you are anxious, it is okay. If you're uncertain, if you're suicidal, please don't keep it, do not keep it to yourself. Please reach out. Reach out, reach out. And for everybody else, if you're not feeling these things that I mentioned, when somebody seeks out to you and express to you that they're experiencing this or they're going through this, that is not the time that you need to condemn them or be negative or belittle what they're telling you. Because like Dr. Phil said earlier in our conversation, you are not the one to validate what they're feeling. They know what they're experiencing. They know what they're feeling. Do the best that you can. If you don't have any help to offer, please direct them to professional help, which is available for them. And Dr. Phil, the time is has ended, but one other thing that I wanted to discuss with you, which I believe we'd have to talk about it for another show or save it for later, is the mental health disorders that are within our community. Being in the mental health field, I have seen so much. Like, there are so many things that are out there, and we work with people that have all type of diagnosis. And I look at some of these things, and I think back to when I was in Ghana, and I'm like, okay, so this person that was doing this is what was wrong with them. But in Ghana, we associated them with so many different things. And these people that are here, they're able to get the help that they need, and they try to do everything possible for them to have a normal lifestyle. But back home, when you go, I think when you go to prayer camps and you go to mountains and churches, there are so many people there. Like, family members have left their loved ones there because they're experiencing these things that are like mental, and there are professional physical help for them, and we have just tied it all into spiritual matters. And just like you said, the faith has its role to play, but even by faith we have to, Bible says that we walk by, sorry, faith without works is useless. And so if we have faith, we still have to take that step that we need to take for God to glorify himself in that way. And so what I just want to say is that we would have to sit down and talk about this. And the people, before coming here, when we said somebody was mad, it was somebody roaming the street with their clothes off and their head
Right,
twisted,
twisted.
and they haven't taken showers for days, and they're just talking to themselves. But when you come to America, when we say somebody is mad, it means they are angry. And then somebody that have mental health in America, my sister will say they are all dressed in nice suits, so you can't even tell
Yeah.
who is mentally sound and who is not mentally sound. But thank you so much for being with us today. I am sure that just as I have learned a lot, my audience also learned a lot, and this is only the beginning of the conversation. I appreciate everything that you brought here today. Thank you. And for
Thank you for having me.
everybody that is watching, thank you all so much for joining us on We Need to Talk. Please remember, we are going to be live again in April. We Need to Talk is every other Sunday. So in February, we did every Sunday because it was Black History Month and it was also Valentine's Day month. But after February, we are back to our regular schedule, which is every other Sunday. So we are going to be live again on April the 10th. We're going to be live again on April the 10th. So please remember to join us at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time on April the 10th for We Need to Talk. Also remember to subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. You don't have to pay, it's free. So please subscribe and share the link as well. Thank you all so much. Remember, O&O signature, if you need anything African wear, anytime you see me on We Need to Talk, everything that is on me is African made, including the body. It's also African made. We have you covered. If you need clothes for men, for women, for children of all ages and all sizes, we've got you covered. We have accessories from earrings, necklaces, bracelet, waist beads, sandals, slippers. As the summer is coming out, I know we are all about to take off our shoes and put on sandals, slippers. Please call O&O Signature for yours. You can contact us at 469-769 2306. Again, it's 469-769-2306. You can follow us on Facebook at OO Signature. You can also follow us on Instagram at OO Signature. Remember, O&O Signature, we do it to fit you perfectly. Also remember to join us, or you can like us. We Need to Talk on Facebook at Needs to Talk Sundays, Needs to Talk Sundays on Instagram as well. Please share, 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 and watch out this week. We're going to put out a video of what the streets have to say about Africa. We did some street interviews, and I'm sure you all are going to love it so much. So thank you. So Dr. Phil, before we leave, you have to give advice to the parents that are watching and then advice to the children that are watching.
Yo, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. What I would say is for parents, we need to listen to our children. We need to be attuned to their experiences, what they are going through, and build a trust so that when they have certain experiences, we will be the first point of contact that they will be able to confide in. And for children, I want to say that children should also listen to their parents, know that their parents have good intentions for them when they have issues or disagreement, things that they want to do or certain things that they've experienced and they want to proceed in a certain way that their parents are not in favor of, they should have conversation around it. When there is active conversation in a family environment, when children feel included in major decisions, they become part of the family. We may think that certain major decisions, such as, say, buying a house, is something that only adults should involve in. But seeking children's perspective sometimes can also help. It's not to say that you are leaving those major decisions to the child to make, but when the child feels like he or she is part of the conversation, he or she then feels like he's part of the family beyond being just a member. So what I would say is that for the general well-being of both parents and children, we should have an open environment where conversations can be had that will make children feel valued and their responses validated.
Thank you so much, Dr. Phil. So we're going to read our last comments on Facebook and on YouTube before we go. Okay, Mr. Ability said, hello, I'm live. Miss Elizabeth Ann said, yes, culturally specific in education. Many turn to faith before they turn to mental health counseling. This is an excellent example of how we address culture needs through understanding. Mrs. Gloria Nyumute said, great discussion. Mr. Oscar Srebo gave thumbs up, and Mrs. Gloria Nyumute clapped, and Mr. Oscar Srebo said, lovely host. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we cannot wait to see you again for We Need to Talk on April the 10th. Have a wonderful and a blessed day. Enjoy your week. Thank you.